Hello. Today we will tell the story of an English criminal and wartime spy, Eddie Chapman. Eddie Chapman was born on November 16, 1914 in Durham, England. His father was a former sailor, and after Eddie was born, he made his way into advertisement business. Eddie Chapman had two siblings. He was the eldest son in the family, a family that was too indifferent to his children. Eddie would leave home for school and go to the movies. Coming home after watching movies all day at the movie theater, Eddie couldn't find anyone at home. His family would be out all the time. Eddie enlisted in the British Army when he was 17, and shortly thereafter he joined the 2nd Battalion, which served in the Tower of London. Everything was fine at first. Eddie said he liked his uniform very much and wanted to serve the British Army for life. Over time, Eddie became tired of his military service, serving hours under harsh conditions, and with the added harsh weather conditions, there was no longer a desire to serve. After 9 months of tenure, he received a 6-day leave. But Eddie had other plans. His goal was to escape. He didn't think of ever going back. Eddie had met a woman months ago in Sarhar and was planning to get married, saying he loved her very much. Perhaps it was that girl who gave him the idea to escape from the military. After Eddie took leave and left the battalion, he immediately took his girlfriend with him and went to a farmhouse for hiding. But this escape lasted only 2 months. The police caught Eddie Chapman in the city center and sent him to prison. After 2 months on trial, Eddie was sentenced to 84 days in prison and was sent to a military prison in Aldershot. There was a bitter joy in him when his captivity was over, as he was labeled dishonorable for escaping from the military, which was a huge problem in those years. It would appear as an obstacle to Eddie at every stage of his life, from getting married to finding a job. Eddie returned to Sarhar after he was released from prison. When he was a bartender, worked in theaters, so he took his chances at every low-paying job. Over time, however, he became addicted to gambling and alcohol, so his salary was far exceeding his expenses. As the days passed, his debts increased, and Eddie spent half the day drinking. In time, he became involved in crimes such as robbing stores and pickpocketing. Finally, he received his first civil prison sentence. Now his new home was Wormwood Scrubs Prison. Eddie met James Wellhead during his imprisonment. James was a well-known name in the underworld. Thanks to Eddie James, he got out of prison and got into the fake check business, becoming a member of the illegal gang known as the Jelly Gang. The Jelly Gang was known for fraud and theft. Months later, Eddie became known for opening safes and preparing for large-scale robberies. He took part in many illegal activities with the gang. Eddie Chapman became famous for robbing in England and its immediate surroundings, but this fame would not last long. Shortly afterwards, Eddie traveled to Scotland to rob an association in Scotland. The robbery was successful. Eddie's next stop was in France. However, a bad surprise awaited him in France. While having dinner with his girlfriend Betty Farmer at Hotel La Plage, police broke into the hotel to detain Eddie. Eddie had not anticipated this raid. However, thanks to his agility, he was able to get away. He jumped out the window and ran away, but his mind was still in another robbery. He made a terrible mistake that night by attempting another robbery. This time he was caught by the police. Things did not go well at the court. Eddie was sentenced to 14 years in prison and sent to an island called Jersey. But for Eddie, maybe everything was starting over. Eddie Chapman was still in captivity when the Channel Islands were invaded by Germany. While in prison, he met Anthony Faramis. His life would take a different turn soon. When Eddie Chapman was transferred to Fort de Romainville in Paris, he received an offer that would make him known in the world history. Germans wanted Eddie to act as an agent and leak information. For someone in the position of Eddie, there was no point in thinking too much. Under the leadership of German von Groening, who served in Nantes, Eddie Chapman was trained in explosives, radio communication, parachuting, and many other disciplines. His code name was Fritz. Von Groening used Eddie's anger towards England. Eddie was sent to England to complete his agent training and demonstrate his talent after finishing his term in France. On December 16, 1942, Eddie was put on a bomber equipped with a gun, cyanide capsule, wireless devices, and 1,000 pounds. The voyage was going well, but after hours of flight, Eddie's oxygen mask broke and he had a nosebleed. Eddie managed to land in his target area near the town of Littleport, where his mission was to blow up the Havilland aircraft factory in Hatfield, England. However, as soon as he landed in England, Eddie had devised completely different plans he thought would be better for his own safety. Before Eddie came to England, Britain had already deciphered secret codes of Germans and had found out a lot of information, such as when Eddie was coming, what he would do, and when he would leave. They had watched his plane before Eddie arrived and had been prepared for the most precise capture plan. Before the Mi-5 support capture team caught Eddie, Eddie went to the police and surrendered. He explained that he was loyal to England and that he was not an agent. The British made a plot against Germans and decided to use Eddie as their counter-agent. The British sent Eddie to the southwest home named Camp 20, where the crew explained the whole plan. The British would create a fake explosion at the aircraft factory and make Germans believe that Eddie executed their plan. After a long time, part of the aircraft factory was detonated in a controlled manner. Around the same time, the German reconnaissance plane arrived and photographed the entire factory to prove that the factory had exploded. The British also published a report about the incident in the Daily Express newspaper in order to increase the credibility. There were now preparations for the return for Eddie. The Britons contacted Germans on behalf of Eddie and sent the message, "Get me by boat or submarine." But the Germans did not make a positive comeback and ordered Eddie to return to Portugal. The English prepared Eddie very well and put Eddie on a psychological test to understand whether he could really deceive Germans. Eddie was boarded on a merchant ship and sent to Lisbon. After a small assignment in Portugal, Germans sent Eddie to Oslo to teach at the School of Espionage. At that time, he was awarded the Iron Cross for his so-called outstanding achievement. Eddie was also awarded a monetary prize. Eddie informed Germans about Britain's new bombs at that time, leaving Britain in a difficult situation. At the same time, he secretly photographed German agents who stayed at home during his tenure in Oslo and sent them to England. It made the most sense for Eddie to be on both sides, as he later told the Germans some details he knew about Britain's war plans. Eddie was sent back to England by Germans months later. His mission was to brief the operation of the Overlord. Eddie flew and parachuted down to Cambridgeshire in June 1944. He told Germans about the outcome of their bombardment. While in England, he was again involved in illegal business, gambling, and greyhound racing. England dismissed Eddie, thinking he could no longer benefit his country, paid Eddie £6,000 and pardoned Eddie for his actions. Eddie Chapman had lovers on both sides. He had a girlfriend named Dagmar Lallam in Norway and was engaged to Fred Stevenson in England. Eddie left the two of them after the war and married his girlfriend Betty Farmer, who was raided by the police while they were dining together in France. The couple had a daughter. Eddie was constantly involved in illegal businesses after the war, relying on his wartime duties, smuggling gold in the Mediterranean, and was not punished for the reference he earned in the war. He hired production companies that wanted to serialize his war memories in France, but was fined by England for revealing official secrets. In 1953, he published his own book. Oddly enough, after the war, Van Groening became friends with Eddie and even attended Eddie's daughter's wedding. Eddie Chapman died of heart failure in 1997. Although Eddie was a spy on both sides, his heart was mostly for his country, England.